Arsenal fans extremely concerned for the upcoming season with the new rule change that set-piece goals will only count for half. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, the Black Man on Twitter. Gunner, can you imagine? Can you imagine the relegation battle we would be in if set-piece goals only counted for half? That is the discourse. That is the question. Can we score an open play goal? Well, I don't know if this is dispositive, but we scored 0 open play goals against Lyon, which is indicative of the huge crisis we'll be discussing. I'm kidding. All right, not exactly that, but we will discuss our set-piece prowess, our pressing prowess, our open play goal creation and scoring, maybe opportunity for improvement, right? Because everything is determined by the last preseason game you played, and as Paul will tell us, probably in the next 2 to 3 minutes, preseason is the real season. So we will hear more about that theory from Paul. And we'll let you know that tomorrow, Tim and Clive are doing a pod called Know Your Enemy. In this case, it's not a pod about Paul or myself. It is a pod about Manchester City. So they have done some deep dive research. I think this is one of the nice things, right? Like, we could go out and find a City fan, but that could take till mid-season just to find one. And by that point, it's old news. Or we could just get the excellent podcasting talent we have to do some actual research, which they have done. And they're going to tell you what's been going on in City's preseason and transfer window. We'll talk a little bit about our transfer window. And so, there's a lot going on. So if you want to join up with the Patreon, you're about to get the season's worth of content blasted into your earballs with instant reactions and power rankings and know your enemies and all kinds of things that you can know and learn and see, and maybe even a scouting video if we ever get linked to another player. So we love you. We're excited for that. The new music will kick off, I think, on Thursday's season prediction pod. And the nice thing about the new music is that it is always universally appreciated and accepted, and there is never any strong reaction to it whatsoever. So it's really just a non-event. Here with me now is Paul. You can find him on Twitter. Pause my pants. Pause. And Tim, you can find him on Twitter. Still in there. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
You'll get your Clive tomorrow on the enemy thingy that I described, and then on the Thursday prediction pod, and then on 72,000 pods anon as we all strap in. I may not leave this chair for the next 10 months, which honestly, that sounds kind of nice to me. Paul has a thought?
So Scott and I are going to do a SCAC, stats guy and a civilian, and we're going to include an analysis, a scouting on Liverpool for the season, just to balance out the Tim and Clive thing.
So there you have it. We will have an analysis of the team likely to finish second and an analysis of the team likely to finish seventh. So you will get both of those this week. I kid Liverpool supporters who for some reason clicked on this by accident. Okay. Emirates Cup was a good one. Was a trophy. It was a trophy we won. So, let's not hear about not winning trophies. We've won a trophy that, let's be honest, is almost as prestigious as the one United won a couple months ago at this point. We did not get a penalty shootout. And I imagine there must have been a lot of bewildered fans when it was read out over the tannoy, please stay in your seats for the penalty shootout. And I thought it was just a social experiment. How long will someone obey the rules read out over a tannoy before realizing they've been lied to? See, this is it. Your people in authority positions are lying to you. You need to accept that you're being lied to. I know there's been a lot of sort of questions about social media behaviors and things like that. So I will let you know, with no strong opinion one way or the other, we continue to be on many different social media platforms, but I'm trying out Threads, and I know Clive is as well. And I've seen Paul over there. Tim, I don't know if you've set something up there. Not yet. So we'll see if that happens. I mean, frankly, I think what's just happening is that social media fatigue is a thing, and I'm just doing less of it in general. I think the thing I'm on most now is Discord, which might explain why my therapy bills are going up. But that's another story. But yeah, if you want to join us over there, if that's a place you prefer to be, same handle, same everything, just find me in the pod and some of the pod contributors over there if you'd like. Okay. 4 minutes and 15 seconds, a bit longer than I would have liked with that. So let me start from the beginning, and I'll see if I can do it. No, I'm kidding. Tim, the Emirates Cup. I think there's a lot of things that we can tease out of this. The meat of the conversation for me, I think, is about how these last two games have you thinking about how we line up for Wolves and how we start the season. So before we do that, let's just do some of the game stuff. And I think in the first 30 minutes, the single biggest thing I took away from this was how intense and effective our pressing was. And that was also the case against Leverkusen. And it really looked to me, and if you look at like field tilt and some other data stuff, it looks at about 30 minutes like there is a change, not like, oh, we just got tired, but maybe even an intentional change of approach to turn the dial back a bit and go more mid block or even low block. So I'm wondering if you're prepared to draw any conclusions from the way our press has looked in these last two games, and especially against Lyon, and if there might be an emphasis here on that period of the game and how we might approach it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was very, very intense. I was sat on opposite side of the stadium to where I usually am, so I was kind of above Mikel Arteta in the technical area, and he looked like Mikel Arteta. He was kicking every ball, waving furiously, etc., etc. It was clear that he wanted his players to treat this like a competitive game, and I think they did. For that first half an hour, it was a very warm day yesterday in London. So I think a mixture of maybe being 2-0 up, it being pre-season, the fact that the weather, there was a cooling break, I think they call them now. So those might well have been factors, yes. But for me, that was the detail. That's one of the details I've really been looking for in pre-season, actually, the pressing. Like, I think that's somewhere where, again, not so much the actual pressing, but the end result of it is somewhere where we can improve. And I do think that's probably tied into some issues we still have a little bit around conversion, because I feel like we're very good at getting into the danger zones, but we maybe don't convert as often as we should do. But yeah, in this game and the Leverkusen game, the press was right up there. I said this on the instant reaction. I think that's the kind of intensity. If we go into the Wolves game like that, and, we're going to have another week of training. We've got some players who are going to have another week of training behind them from pre-season. Like, I think we'll be all right in that. Like, I'd be happy with the level of intensity in that game. So I think that was a detail I was definitely looking for. And I could see Arteta below me how much he really, really wanted his team to treat this like the Wolves game. In terms of the lineup, I'd say I still think there's a little bit of mystery in that we probably have a couple of positions where, is it Jorginho or Partey? Well, they got a game each. Is it Trossard or Martinelli? They got a game each. Is it Jesus or Havertz up front? They got a game each this week. So if you're Gary O'Neill, you probably know 7, 8 of the players that are going to start. Probably 9, actually, because Havertz will start one way or another. But there's a couple of little details there where you probably look at the fact that across the 2 games, different people got a different amount of minutes. But I think it certainly answers our question about who's going to start at left back against Wolves. I think it's pretty clear that's going to be Zinchenko. I'm fine with that. So yeah, look, really, really good workout. And I was really impressed by this because it just didn't look like a friendly to me, which is great.
Yeah. And I think, first of all, I certainly agree with the Zinchenko thing. I don't think there's any question about that. We can get into the lineup thing a little bit. I want to just try to touch on the game specifically before we do Wolves lineup questions, because I have a few of those, and we won't have time to do as much of those Thursday because we're doing our season prediction and preview pod on Thursday. We will do a Wolves preview for patrons on Friday. But Paul, there were some interesting dynamics too. I think we definitely saw it against Bayer Leverkusen, although that may have been because we had Fabio Vieira on the right. But I think we still saw it against Lyon, which is a rebalancing of the flanks in terms of our usage and our ability to attack down both. That could be simply the Zinchenko effect. We know that he gets on the ball, and we know that he's a high-volume passer, and he opens up the left-hand side a bit. It could be by design. There's some data that shows that we were much more balanced in the way we did that against Lyon, and there were some interesting things happening, like Bukayo Saka showing up at the back post, a couple of headed opportunities. But I think in general, forget him showing up at the back post and think about it more from the standpoint of him being open at the back post, sort of unmarked or having lost a marker with the attention being dragged over to the left. I think that's a scenario that Mikel will want to repeat to try to find Saka more isolated, right? Because one of the problems you're going to run into with Saka in any season, he's going to be double and triple and quadruple and quintuple teamed. But if you can get the left side working more and teams have to flow to that side more, you may be able to switch it and cross it and find Saka in space. So what do you think of that dynamic, the Saka the back post dynamic, and maybe trying to rebalance the flanks, get it the left-hand side to be at least close to as important as the right-hand side, so defenses can't be as comfortable in the way they set up?
Yeah, I think you're right. So I think this was kind of 22-23 season left-hand side dynamics, in that it wasn't that we were doing something different on the left-hand side to what was the plan last year. It was just really working. So obviously it's Martinelli on the left wing. We had Rice as the left 8. Zinchenko in his spots, hitting his marks. He was playing line breakers, hitting the edge of the box, looked confident, zipping it around. It was a somewhat revitalized Thomas Partey that gives you some hope that if he's going to play minutes for us, if he's going to be on the pitch this season, he can be a real asset. That's the beauty of preseason, the dawning of eternal hope for each player. But the left-hand side just worked. I don't think it was different to the plan of last season. It just worked great. I was actually a bit bummed that when I saw the lineup, not because I don't love the guys, I just really liked what happened in the Bayer Leverkusen game, where, as you said, more important than the fact that it was Vieira on the right, it wasn't Saka on the right. And so we basically Saka'd on the left-hand side with Trossard, Jesus, Havertz, and again Zinchenko. And all the play, all the building, all the kind of wizardry, the rotations were on the left-hand side, leaving the right-hand side open. As it turned out, we didn't need too much from the right-hand side in the Leverkusen game. This was a return to all of the kind of the triangles being on the left-hand side, being on the right-hand side with Saka and Odegaard and White in their positions, doing their thing, meaning the left-hand side, once we got the ball out there, had space for Martinelli to run into. And that's what we really saw. Martinelli running in behind, tearing their defense a new one. You know, there's the whole discussion around finishing, but like if you get into those spots, let's go back to our standard position. If you're getting into those positions, good things are going to happen. Might take a game or two for people to start hitting their marks. But if you're getting those opportunities and you're getting guys into the box, onto the end of the ball, the finishing's going to come. Maybe not to the perfection we're looking for, but to higher and higher levels. And what we saw on the left-hand side was just really good 22-23 type left-hand side with Martinelli, not Xhaka, but Rice. I thought Rice's patterns, his movements, his triangles, he's going to grow in that area and get better. And I thought he had a really good game in terms of, pushing out to the wing, making space then for Zinchenko to zip it up the middle, and Martinelli would do a darting run across. So just much, much better function. I was disappointed it wasn't the previous game's lineup, but that tells me we've two different ways of working. Of course, having seen it, I was delighted with what they gave us.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit, because I think there are some big lineup decisions for Mikel to make, maybe more than heading into either of the last two seasons. So we can touch on that. But by the way, to the extent that there was an intention to press early and maybe not late, Mikel certainly wasn't willing to concede that. On setting the tone early with pressing, he said, look at today with the way we started, for sure. It's about maintaining that for 95 minutes. And that's the target and objectives that we need to have. There's a lot of positives to take from today's performance again. So, I think that is interesting. He also sort of referenced on the general performance. I think the team was exceptional, especially in the first half. There were moments where we played at the highest level and then we sort of maintained it. We dropped a little bit in the second half. The conditions were tough. I also think, and I've said this many times before, preseason games tend to lose structure and I think just overall intensity when those the high volume of subs starts coming in. Paul?
Yeah, so like we mentioned the water break, and the commentary in the Arsenal player was quite interesting in that he said something around when they were in the water break, it's very hard to maintain the momentum when you take that break at 30 minutes. I think there's no way we didn't want to press for the full 45, but there's only so much gas you have. And you give a little water break, the other guys get a little more organized, they get a little more structured, you've lost a little bit of the mo. So I'm sure the intention was to go at least for 45 with that intensity, but you could see that it fell off a bit.
Yeah. Well, Tim, one of the things that I think people are, because look, in order for nature to heal and the world to be in balance, we have to have something to freak out about. And as good as Arsenal are at the moment, you really have to search for those things. So the thing right now is we're never going to score open play goals. That's going to be the challenge. Now, all kidding aside, I do think we potentially have a weakness there to the extent that we have any weakness, which is that if you were to say, gosh, I've got to get Arsenal under the microscope, is there any area where they're weak? I think under a microscope, you'd say they could probably generate more good quality open play chances and finish them. And I do think if you look at this game, as good as the press was, my instinct is that the high turnovers we forced weren't capitalized on to the extent that I'd like to see. So I'm curious how you think about whether that's just the case of, hey, that's football. It's hard to create chances and you don't get every chance right. Or is this something that Mikel needs to focus on? He did have an interesting comment about bringing something in the attack and sort of said, you know, that's something we're looking at, but right now there's no news there, essentially. Which I think is an interesting one. Like, yeah, on the strength and depth up front, we will see and evaluate if there's something there to decide. At the moment, there isn't. So that sort of says to me, there's enough there that says to me, Mikel understands that like we need to be more ruthless and efficient. And he's talked about that a lot in preseason. So how do you think about this ability to turn exceptional off the ball work and pressing into what it's designed to do, which is big chances and goals?
That is the biggest issue that Arsenal have, in my view. And if I think we all know that we need a midfielder, we need an attacker, and there's probably something in the background about goalkeepers as well, because Ramsdale will probably go and we'll need someone and blah, blah, blah. But if you told me now that Arsenal could only bring in one player for the rest of the summer, I'd make it an attacker. No questions asked. And, you know, sometimes this is how short our memories can be. What was the first thing Arsenal tried to do this summer? They tried to sign Benjamin Sesko, right? They tried to buy a striker. Now, you know, clearly that was tied to the player himself as well. They felt that, that was an interesting profile and someone that they could bring in. But that's the first thing they tried to do. And if you look at the most obvious ways that Arsenal can get that other 2 or 3 points this season, it is the fact that, again, sorry, I know I've repeated this a lot during the summer, there were 5 Premier League games where we didn't score a goal last season. Newcastle away, Villa away, Man City away among them. Scored from a set play at Anfield, didn't score at Bayern, didn't score at Porto. And in a lot of those games, we didn't actually even really look like scoring very much. So we need to up our level of offensive threat. The fact that Arsenal are trying to facilitate, have sold Smith Rowe, although they probably consider him more a midfielder. They're willing to let Nketiah go, that they'd be willing to let Reece Nelson go. I think they're trying to make room for that, essentially. So I think they know that. I do think Arsenal will do something there, but it might be last day or two of the window. But clearly it's probably too much to call it a concern. But it's that is the most identifiable way. The game I come back to a lot as well, not just those games I mentioned where Arsenal didn't score. Do you remember Brighton at home last season, where that might have been our best performance of the season? And like we only won 2-0 and it should have been 4 or 5. Like it really, really should have been. Forest opening home game of last season. We're 2-0 up at half time. I remember sitting there thinking, right, here we go, 5 or 6-0, 2-1. And I know that's a bit harsh because there were plenty of teams we did put to the sword 5 and 6-0, but yeah, I think it's a mixture of that, really making sure games are over, but also opening the scoring. And I think when you look at how often we needed a set-piece goal to open the scoring last season, we've got to, I think Arsenal have got to work on the basis and assume and disaster plan to the extent that set-piece record is not going to hold up. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not going to, and on the evidence of yesterday, it still looks quite good. But Arteta and the staff have to assume that they overperformed on set pieces, and that's not going to happen again this season. And so maybe they need to find 10 more goals from somewhere. So I definitely think, the Goldilocks 35 goal a season striker. I don't think is out there. That's not going to happen.
I agree.
But I think that maybe that one more wide player, that one more centre forward option, whichever one it is, even if that just means kind of, to use Clive's phrase, powering up from the bench, even if that's 65 minutes, we've been banging on the door with, 3 players, then there's another 2 getting ready to come on, and the opposing defence goes, oh God, not these guys. We do need to find a way in those small moments. And I would be worried if we tried to do that with last season's players, because I don't think that Havertz and Jesus and co are necessarily all of a sudden going to become deadly finishers. I think we know what we've got there. We can hope for more from Jesus and Martinelli, but at the same time, you can't just say, oh, they'll improve and everyone else will be just as good last season, because Trossard might not get 17 goals this time. Havertz might not, so it's all very well saying Jesus and Martinelli could get another 5 each, but you might lose those elsewhere. So yeah, that's a long way of saying, I think we all understand. I think that we need a forward, and we can see in what Arteta said, particularly after that Liverpool game. I think he was quite clear there about, I think he used the word punishing teams, and we didn't punish Lyon enough yesterday.
Yeah, it's so weird though, because I think we all would say that our players are not efficient enough in front of goal, right? That they're not clinical enough. And yet, for the last 2 seasons, we have produced historic levels of XG over performance. It is a weird conundrum, right? And I'll steal a Paulism here, which is we need to do more XG, right? And that's the funny thing, is that actually, even though individually we don't think of any of our players as clinical, as a team, we are as clinical as anyone in the league to some extent. We just need to create more chances. And if I look at our pressing and the high ball recoveries we had in this game, I don't think my criticism is our shots didn't go in. I think my criticism is we didn't create enough good shots from the moments where we took the ball off them. So it's final ball, final decision stuff. I want to pivot from this, Paul, slightly though, because I thought you might like that. Pivot from this, and we'll come back to finishing and forwards and stuff, because I think the Trossard and Gabriel Martinelli comment from Mikel is interesting, and that position is one to discuss. But I do want to just touch on set pieces, because we've got both our goals there. Saliba gets a goal. Gabriel gets a goal. I mean, these are weapons. Calafiori is now being integrated. I really, really want to give you the quote that Mikel said on what Calafiori brings to the team. He brings a lot of versatility, because he can play in 2 or 3 different positions, and especially in attack. Like, he specifically calls that out. I think that's really interesting.
I was just going to say, I heard a really good stat about Calafiori today, which was something like there was no bear with me, it's a bit convoluted. There was no defender in the top 4-5 leagues who produced more shots on goal from a carry for their team. So obviously, carrying the ball up the pitch that ended in the shot on goal. He led by quite some distance in the top 5 European leagues.
Interesting. So you're saying he's going to go on a lot of adventures, which is fun. But so this is big, and it is so incredible, because you would think, idiot Arsenal, taking one of your biggest players in Declan Rice and having him take the corner instead of finish the corner. But when you can deliver them that well, that's probably a good use of his talent. It is a remarkable reminder of his technical quality. I mean, the delivery he gets on those in-swingers is fantastic. I mean, we probably should have had a 3rd set piece goal. Really incredible stuff. And then Saka's delivery is excellent as well. And I know I'm repeating something I said on the instant reaction, but basically it must have Gareth Southgate looking at that and going, why did I let Foden take every single corner kick? But that's another story. Paul, what do you think of corner? Let's not say set pieces, to your point. Let's say corners. They are a weapon. They do count. And you're going to get more. See, this is where everything is related. The hip bone's connected to the knee bone, all that. Well, it's not. Otherwise, you're going to have major medical problems. The hip bone is connected to the thigh bone, which is connected to the knee bone. Otherwise, you have knee hip, which is not a condition you want. Knee hip is not good. Okay, look, getting back to my point, if you have a ton of possession in the attacking third, which we do, and you put teams under a ton of pressure in their defensive third, which we do, you are naturally going to have more passes cut out that go out for corners and shots that go out that are cut out for corners, which we do, and you're going to get more corners. And if you're very good at them, people keep saying, can Arsenal possibly reproduce their corner kick success? Well, it's not just that we're good at them. It's that we are also going to generate a lot of them by virtue of the positional and territorial dominance that we establish. So I think it's all kind of connected. But in terms of corner kicks being a weapon and people's weird willingness, myself included at times, to hand wave non-open play goals. Like, it is the single biggest example of coaching in action and preparation in action. Ironically, you can't prepare for open play, but you can very much prepare for corner kicks because they're all exactly identical. Everyone can stand where they want to stand. So why do we have a tendency to hand wave these? And do you see them being just as important again?
Yeah, I don't see. I'm thinking this is sustainable. We had 265 corners last year. We were actually only the third highest for corners. I think Man City and somebody else, maybe Liverpool, was ahead of us. So we can get even more corners. And if you think about, we don't spend a lot of time knocking around the back like other teams. Our defensive third touches, you kind of think of us as a playing out from the back kind of team, the goalkeeper to the centre backs or whatever. Our centre backs, of course, are playing so high. We're actually in the middle third, sometimes on the edge of the attacking third with some of the touches. But that just says we play the game in their half for most of the season. We play it in the attacking third. We're something like second for attacking third touches. We're first for penalty box touches. And if you think of what happens with those, they tend to go out, you either get a shot off or they go out for a corner or they get recycled and you go again and eventually you're going to get that corner. And we're just really, really good at corners. You can see it. And what particularly impressed me, yes, Rice's crosses are phenomenal off the corner. The aggression at which Gabriel ran for his header for the goal yesterday, like the guy was on a mission. He looks at every corner as an opportunity for him to score. There's a kind of belief, a desire to get into that position that puts him in pole position. And the other thing you hear about is this, the Mikel Arteta thing where he had the pickpockets doing the thing at the event.
Let me stop you. For people that don't know this, Mikel hired a pickpocket at a player event to literally pick the pocket of players, I guess, to teach them to stay alert, which, again, is cringe if you're finishing 16th, but it's genius if you're getting 92 points and winning the league.
Yeah, and I wonder if it was certainly to be alert and stuff. I wonder if it was also, there's talk about marginal gains, right? You think of Ben White in the 6-yard box with the goalkeeper, fiddling around with the gloves, little stuff. It's just that mindset that there's something else there beyond doing the job of standing there and making your run. And there's a lot of trickery. Now that every club knows we're coming to get goals off corners, they're going to be ready. So the trickery levels, that kind of the doing things around the edges, the all of that stuff, I think is very much a part of the plan and how we make this happen. There's the whole Nicholas Jover thing, the Ben White with the gloves, the whoever, and the complexity and variety of corners we have. I think it's a real thing, and I do think it's like your air miles for using your credit card. We're getting these corners, we're getting these opportunities, these situations as a function of the intensity of playing in the attacking third, of most touches in the box. They're the natural offshoot, and we know we're going to get a bunch of corners, and we're very good at converting them.
Yeah, and to your point, I think delivery has to be good or a corner won't work. We clearly have a viewpoint on how corners should be taken. And what I mean by that, because I think this is really interesting, Liverpool had the most corners last season, 287. City had the second most, 286. Then we had the third most, 265. Next was Bournemouth at 235, and it goes down from there. So really there was sort of a big three. We were very much sort of in that space between the first two and the group below. So we did get a lot of corners, and it's not surprising that the three teams that were the most dominant attacking forces in the league had the most corners. But I think this is interesting. Of the 287 corners Liverpool took, 86 were in-swingers. Of the 286 corners City took, 114 were in-swingers. Of the 265 corners we took, 217 were in-swingers. One was an out-swinger. The rest were short corners. I mean, we took almost 100. We took over 100 more in-swingers than City, and over 100, about 135 or so, 140 more than Liverpool. We clearly believe, and I think it's borne out in our results, that delivery will produce the best opportunity to score from corners. But like, that's not an accident. You know what I mean? That is a philosophy. We take in-swinging corners, period, unless we take them short. So I just think that's an interesting one. Let's move off this topic. Another topic I want to touch on from this game before we get into maybe more of the Wolves theorizing stuff related to squad and transfer stuff, because we don't need to talk about too much of the game. It is a preseason game, although there are little moments. Tim, you already mentioned that you thought Zinchenko was good, and I don't think there's much to talk about with Zinchenko because, frankly, he's starting against Wolves, right? Like, that's it. Let me give you the updates on Timber and Tomiyasu straight from the manager's mouth. On Timber, it's fine. He's been doing some individual work. That's clear now, so we expect him to be ready to train with the group in the next week because he has no reaction, so quite positive. Unfortunately, on Tomiyasu, yeah, I think it will take weeks on that one, unfortunately. He's going to have to be patient and work through it, because I think it's going to take a few weeks. There is a world, I believe, where a Tomiyasu who is fit for 38 games a season would play 30 games for us at left back. Like, I really think Mikel rates him, and I really think he gives us an excellent balance of all the things we want. Dual winning, versatility, enough passing that he can invert, really good attacking contribution. But the left back position looks pretty locked in to be Zinchenko's right now. And I guess the best thing I could say, Tim, let's not stay on this long, but just super quick, because I want to get to a bigger issue. Zinchenko's defensive qualities are what they are. I don't think that's changing. I'm not sure I think he's the calamity that some would make out, but there's definitely some lapses in his concentration that are part of his game. There are definitely some weaknesses. 1v1. Clive said something on the other pod that I thought was really brilliant. You'll find that not surprising. If Zinchenko lets himself get stopped and started, he's dead. You know what I mean? Like, if a winger can stop him and start him, he doesn't have that ability to stay with them. But I do think last season the problem with Zinchenko wasn't the defensive side, because we know that. I think the technical side dipped. He was making more errors on the ball. It wasn't zippy as much. And in this game in general, I thought we did really good one-touch passing. Really good. Either a touch to control and a touch to give it, or not even a touch to control, just first time. The ball moved at a really nice tempo. And Zinchenko's technical level the last couple games has looked really good, really high, back to sort of what I think we saw when he first arrived. So I'm feeling pretty good about him. I want to get to other topics, but I at least want to get you to weigh in a little more just on the idea that the things we think Zinchenko is good at had dipped, but they look back to what they were when they were good. And so that's why I think he's looking better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think I've decided to make Zinchenko is still going to be an important player my thing for the season. And a couple of things. I know it's largely circumstance that he started a lot of these games. I think it tells you something that the number change happened so late. When we got to the point where we really had to fix down the squad numbers, because everyone's known Cedric will be leaving since the day he signed that contract. So that squad number did not only just come up. So I think that tells you that Arsenal would have been open to a sale. However, I don't think that means that his role is done. I don't think he's going to play every game by any means, but I think one of the things I'm looking for this season, and we talked about it a little bit there with the lineup, and I just think that there's going to be, or at least the intention will be, for a variety of approaches, and that we don't use the same thing every week. Because what the pattern we've seen over the last couple of seasons is we do something, it works amazingly well for a few months, we go on a run, and then we get a bit found out maybe, or we get a big injury and we hit a divot for a few games, and then Arteta reaches back into his magic tactic sack. We do something else. We go on another big long run. And I don't think he wants to do that anymore, because those little 3-game bumps have cost us badly. The last 3 seasons, actually, they cost us top 4 3 seasons ago. So I think that his ideal is the opposing manager will have maybe a template of 2 or 3 approaches, and the opposing manager doesn't know which one it's going to be. And so to Paul's point about we look a bit 22, 23 at the moment, I think that's right. And I don't think it looks to me like we have not discarded that. We have not discarded Rice as a 6. We have not discarded Havertz as a midfielder. Instead of coming up with a new approach, doing it for 6 months until it gets found out, then blowing it up again. I think he wants a bit of mix and match there, and I think Zinchenko will be part of that. And I think there will be plenty of games, probably home games against teams in the bottom half, where he will start. And I think the interesting thing about Zinchenko as well, Elliot, and where I've got a little bit of faith, I think he's a smart guy, right? And I think he's a smart football player as well. The role we ask him to do is difficult. We ask him to play 2 positions at once. That is difficult to do. Nothing you've said about his shortcomings is untrue. We can all see it. But we put a lot on him to play 2 positions at once. That's hard. And he's been able to do that. And I think that's to his credit. But I also think he just strikes me as the type of guy that will understand my primacy in this team has dropped over the last season. There is a reason for that, and I need to go and fix it. And I don't know what. Well, I say I don't know why. I think I know why, but I've just got a bit of faith that he has the self-analysis to say, okay, I understand what happened here. I was never a good defender. It's probably because I spent too much time in midfield. I got too cocky on the ball. I lost the risk-reward dial, and I've seen him be a bit more circumspect this pre-season. I hope he keeps that up.
Yeah, I think the only issue for Zinchenko is who he's got to be picked ahead of in a very crowded group. I mean, if Tomiyasu does ever get fit, and I realize that there are going to be people rolling their eyes at that, but it happens at some point. And if Timber is fit, and if Calafiori is up to speed, that group looks really strong, even before you mention Kivior, who I still think has a chance to move this window. And so I think Zinchenko maybe has some qualities that none of those other 3 quite have to his level. But I think 2 or maybe all 3 of them have him pretty close and have him beat in other ways. And so it's just going to be a tough battle for him to stay in the team. Now, he has the shirt to start the season. And that is an advantage. If you've got the shirt to start the season, that is an advantage. Now, we know with Zinchenko, ironically, I don't think it's the errors that saw him drop out of Arsenal's first rotation. I think it's the injuries. The irony, of course, is that Zinchenko, the one who we thought of as being sort of a perma-croc, is the fit one right now. So maybe we just need to readjust our thinking and be grateful because, and I've said this on other pods, if you think he's 4th choice left back, whether I agree with you or not, who has a 4th choice left back like Alexander Zinchenko? You know what I mean? And like any other team that had their 1st choice left back out and their 2nd choice left back out and their 3rd choice left back is a new signing and they haven't been integrating him yet, would be in a legit positional crisis having them play some midfielder or some winger at left back. And we have a top left back there. So I do want to shift gears to left wing, but Paul, you have a final thought on that?
Yeah, I agree we have players who do a chunk of what Zinchenko's good at, but I think he's a bit off the charts. And one of the problems we will have this season, and we've had last season and the season before, is that thing where we've got the opponent crowded into their penalty area. They got everybody back, and we need somebody who can mix things up and get the left-hand side going as good as the right-hand side. And his line breakers, his ability to swivel, turn, you have all that possession. The challenge Arteta has and City has is how do you turn possession how do you cash that in for more risk, more clever passes, more things that open it up, and you take a little bit of risk. And nobody does that within our team. Not Tomiyasu, Calafiori won't do it in the same level that Zinchenko does. There's a very specific problem he solves. They're dug in. We have all the ball. We can't hurt them. And that's like, he's going to have if he plays at this level, has that level of confidence, he's going to have a role all season long for those games in which we're trying to work out what we can turn this possession in. What can we trade it for? Well, we can trade it for a guy taking risks and incision and cutting in, finding that seam into the penalty box in a way none of our other players will be able to.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it is just that simple, that if we want to balance the left and the right-hand side, if you play Zinchenko, you're going to get more left-hand side involvement. I mean, there's just no way around that. I think it's really interesting watching Zinchenko and Odegaard sort of take turns with the role that Zinchenko used to just do himself. Zinchenko used to just roam all over the place and collect the ball off the back line and kind of pop up wherever he's needed. I can think of some goals we scored 2 seasons ago where Zinchenko was in the right 8, or right 10, if you want to call it that. Odegaard, who has been off the charts this preseason and was sensational against Lyon, is dropping between defenders to pick up, but also still somehow finding himself between the lines to receive. He's just got a lovely understanding and played another 90 minutes. And he just seems like the player that Mikel, he is that captain, that coach on the pitch kind of captain. It seems like he really understands what Mikel wants and is an exponent of that on the pitch. I want to get to the Leo and Martinelli side of things. Before we do that, I'll just mention this. I believe it was mentioned before kickoff that there is a minor hip injury for Fabio Vieira. I don't know what to tell you. Mikel wasn't asked about it after the game. It doesn't seem to have been brought up, even though the Timber injury and the Tomiyasu injury were. I mean, it doesn't seem to be happening for this guy. He's been auditioning for the sort of Saka backup role, at least for the time being, while things are in flux with maybe a Reece Nelson and maybe a signing. But he's not getting the role at 8 on either side. Ethan Nwaneri, happily, seems to be taking that as an opening. Is this an injury? Is this a quote injury? I don't know, but Vieira's situation is one to monitor. We'll talk a bit about Eddie's situation, by the way, the Mikel Merino deal and other things. I want to talk Leo and Martinelli, but I shouldn't do either of those things until I give you a way to watch video that would otherwise be unavailable to you due to geo-blocking and other potential challenges. And so, it is my great pleasure to tell you about NordVPN. Look, I don't know what makes one VPN better than another. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I understand the technical component of that, but I was having a chat on Discord with someone asking if NordVPN was a good one, and someone else chipped in and they dropped a link to sort of ratings of their speed and their performance, and they said, oh, Nord looks like it's doing pretty well in these ratings, which was good to see. They have an app for iPhone. They have an app for Android, for tablets, for computers. You just click, you say where you want to browse. And then when you're on social and you're like, you won't believe this video, and you click on it, it says not available in your location. Boom, it is available in your location. Just change your location. You want to sign into a browsing or streaming service, I should say. When you're in one country and you want to go to another country, you click a button. You want to watch Match of the Day, or maybe you've gone over to the Emirates from a country where normally you're able to watch all the games. You can browse back at home and use your services to watch all the games. We did that at a patron meetup on Upper Street. Manchester United were playing Fulham, and Alex Iwobi beat them late, and we were able to watch it because I NordVPN'd back to the US and was streaming the game so we could all watch it on my phone while we had drinks before going and watching Arsenal batter. Who do we batter that day? I want to say Newcastle. That was a battering, indeed. So NordVPN also has threat protection. It's definitely something you should try, and the offer that they've given is a really good one. So NordVPN.com/ArsenalVision, NordVPN.com/ArsenalVision. One more time, NordVPN.com/ArsenalVision. You get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan and 4 additional months on top of that. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So do it now, NordVPN.com/ArsenalVision. And a sort of newer arrival, if you missed it last Thursday, Timeline Nutrition is a supplement that is basically all the benefits of pomegranate seeds, right? So what's in pomegranate seeds? They've got this compound which is good for mitochondrial health. It's good for muscle recovery and workout recovery, longevity. MitoPure is what they're calling their answer to urolithin A. I looked up urolithin A on a bunch of sites and basically just saying that it is a compound from pomegranate seeds, I think, are the primary place it comes from. So you have two ways that you can take this. You can take it in a berry powder, or you can take it in a soft gel, whichever you prefer. So you can mix it into breakfast yogurt or smoothie or whatever, or you could just take the soft gels. And the MitoPure is number one doctor recommended urolithin A supplement that is NSF and Clean Label Project certified, which is great. These things, essentially, I think what this compound does, it says here, it goes into your cells and does mitochondrial repair, which, as I remember from my high school biology, is the powerhouse of the cell. So we definitely want to do that. So if you want to get that benefit of MitoPure, Timeline is offering 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Go to timeline.com/ArsenalVision. That's timeline.com/ArsenalVision. Go to timeline.com/ArsenalVision. Do it now. Tim, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Okay. Leo and Martinelli. Mikel didn't back off the competition for this place on managing their minutes. He said the same with the other players. They have to do everything they can to deserve to play as many minutes as we possibly can. And we'll try to make the right calls and the right decisions. What's so interesting between Leo and Martinelli is that they're very different players. And so in the Bayer Leverkusen game, what we saw was this sort of beautiful flowing interchanging of positions between Jesus and Kai and Leo, when they were popping up in different places and the defense couldn't follow them around. And Mikel said after that game, they all have that false nine mentality. Martinelli does not have that false nine mentality. And what we saw in the Lyon game, and I think he had a very polarizing performance because he got him behind and he set us away on counters and he pushed the defense back and he burst in behind and he was frequently a nightmare for them to live with, but didn't quite execute some of the things when he got into those positions that we might ordinarily expect him to execute. Now, I will mention he and Zinchenko were sort of defensively tracking back at one point relatively early in the game. He took the ball off someone. It looked like they fell on his ankle and he was feeling that ankle for a while. And at least on the Arsenal.com stream, they were talking a lot about him sort of nursing that quote unquote injury. So I don't know if that was something that was bothering him, but I'm curious, firstly, just about your appraisal of this performance of Martinelli, because there are two sides to this coin. There's what he gave us in this game is something we lack and we need. I trust him to eventually get the final stuff right. We need that pace. We need that threat in behind. We need the dynamism that he showed. The flip side of that coin is we need to be more efficient in the boxes. We know we're focused on that. And he was very inefficient in the box. So that is a problem that requires Trossard, because Trossard is our most efficient player with the last action. So two sides of the same coin. How do you see it? And how do you see this competition for the place heating up?
Was that for me?
That is for you, Tim. I apologize.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I mean, we could turn it over to Paul, but everybody's begging for you to start answering.
Yeah. It's really interesting how this position will evolve, because there are a couple of positions in the team, maybe more than a couple, where it feels like there might be a bit of a job share kind of happening. That certainly happened at left back last season, though I'm not sure that was by design so much as kind of default, as it were, but it kind of feels like we've got that Jorginho Partey job share. Feels like in the centre forward position at the moment that it will be a bit of a Jesus and Havertz job share, albeit I think Havertz will start pretty much every game in one of two positions. Yep. And so it's interesting to see what will happen to the left wing. Will that become a Martinelli Trossard job share? Will one of them like really, really nail it down? And at the moment it's Trossard's shirt. However, there's a couple of other kind of side points here where another thing I'm looking for this season from Martinelli is to show he can play off Havertz when he's the centre forward. We know Martinelli and Jesus works very nicely. I suspect that Martinelli missed him quite a bit last season, and both when Havertz was left 8 and up front, I just didn't have that same sense from Martinelli that those two players really thrived on combining with one another. And so that's something I'm looking for from Martinelli, because he can't become a player who's, just like, oh, I need this player at left back and I need this player up front to work. And I'm sure he doesn't think like that. Whereas we know, for example, Trossard and Havertz work together really well because Trossard's great at arriving onto the ball. And obviously Trossard and Martinelli are so different as well. You could very much see a world where Arteta might think, well, actually today we need Martinelli's kind of pace and take on ability, as it were, or maybe we need Trossard, to step onto the ball and finish. And because the other thing about Trossard is he's our best finisher, isn't he? I think maybe him and Saka, he's the guy that I want the chance to fall to, and we don't have too many of those, and I think that gives him a little bit of an advantage maybe in this kind of thing. Perhaps if we had a much more reliable goal scoring striker, then Martinelli's kind of qualities would be seen over and above Trossard. So Martinelli's got a fight on his hands. He's had this before though, like 2 seasons ago he was kind of job sharing with Emil Smith-Rowe on the left hand side, and then he left ESR kind of in his wake. So I think it's a really interesting challenge for Martinelli this year. I liked what I saw in this game. I was enthused by it. The execution wasn't quite there, but actually I doubt Martinelli less on the execution side than some of our other forwards. I think what he needs to develop is his left foot. I think there were times where the ball's on his left side and he perhaps wasn't quite willing to take the shot on that left side. But I think also when you accelerate past someone, sometimes you have to stop, let them catch you up and then push past them again. Really get them off balance. If you think of that Henry goal in the San Siro against Zanetti, where he zooms past him and then he stops the ball, he lets Zanetti come back. But once you're sprinting back, your momentum will keep taking you and you can take that player off balance again. So I think he needs to develop that a little bit. But I'm not worried about the player. I kind of think let the best person win on that left-hand side. But I think Martinelli will come into this season knowing he's got a little bit to prove. And I think Arteta's hinted at the fact that he's come in knowing that as well and knowing that in a good way.
Let me ask you, I'll just put you on the spot, Tim. You can only have one of them, but they'll start every one of the 38 league games this season. Which one are you picking?
I'd go for Martinelli. I think he's just got a little bit more to his game all round.
If you gave me a few more games to watch what we saw against Bayer Leverkusen with that Jesus, Kai, and Trossard rotational flow, I might actually pick Trossard because that was really interesting, and I think that will give defenses a lot of problems. But ultimately, I don't know if you can go a whole season being as one-paced as we are in the front line without Martinelli, and I think I'd want that pace. It's a good problem to have, not a bad problem to have. I think sometimes we think of selection headaches as bad. Oh no, one of them, which of these two good players will we pick between? The other thing is, I know Martinelli's not in his best finishing mode currently. Unlike Gabriel Jesus, who has historically underperformed as a finisher, Gabriel Martinelli is 1 season removed from being excellent. Not this past season where he slightly underperformed his XG. The season before where he was co-top scorer with 15 goals, he was our biggest XG overperformer. And I've said this on a pod, I'm going to stop calling it XG overperformer because I think that is a derogatory comment almost. I think the better way to say that is he was our best finisher versus the chances he had. He was our most clinical finisher that season. So I don't think it's outside the range of outcomes that it could happen. But ultimately, this is one of a couple of positional battles that Mikel's going to have to decide on. So, Paul, where do you think we are with this positional battle? I'll give you just one quick quote that I thought was interesting because he was talking about Havertz's versatility and whether Havertz, likes playing striker or would prefer to play another position. And he said, he needs to be open with the qualities and versatility he gives the team. The numbers we have in midfield, he knows about that, playing in midfield. I spoke with him. He's very open in both positions. But this is what he said that I think is great on the difference changing him from midfielder to striker. I think he's enjoying it. The more versatile he is, the more minutes he's going to play. So the players are saying, I can play in another position as well. They all want to play. When you give them the choice, one doesn't play as much. Believe me, they're going to pick the one where they play. So I think players are trying to make themselves available in whatever position they might. Mikel is sort of on record of thinking of Trossard as false 90 from his claims post-Bayer Leverkusen. So it's all very, very interesting to put the pieces together and think about how the manager sees these players. How do you see the left wing battle?
Yeah, it's fascinating, but I think we're very unfair on Martinelli in that on the right-hand side you got Saka, and if he didn't have Odegaard and White in position and he was struggling for part of the season, we'd say, oh, well, he doesn't have Odegaard and White, who have worked out this kind of triangle magic, this coordinated dance they do to get Saka into the best positions. And Martinelli had a new left eight in Rice, who was learning the position and didn't have all the patterns. He'd had Xhaka the season before, and despite, we won't go into the whole Xhaka thing, but the one thing Xhaka knew how to do was play the angles, play the triangles, make the moves. Wasn't
Xhaka
necessarily
and
the guy.
And Zinchenko, by the way.
Exactly.
Right? Two very ball dominant passing players. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we now switch to Trossard and we say, we love what he did against Leverkusen, but he did it with Jesus, Havertz, and Zinchenko. Basically, you got four magicians doing this interchange connectivity runs, giving Trossard's game all the things it would otherwise lack, because he's not great off the touchline, right? We liked him a lot last season for just getting into the box and finishing it. He wants to go from the outside centrally. That's where he hurts them. And so he needs the players around him to get him into those positions. But, having to need Zinchenko, Havertz, and Jesus, what we haven't really seen Trossard do is be a left winger like Martinelli, where he just has to do it himself, because the right wing we got all set up, the left wing you got some space, and in space Martinelli is going to kill the opponent. And so I do think it's a bit harsh on Martinelli. He had to play a lot of last season in the run-in, without the players in position that he needs to make him look good, so he can do his third man runs, his 1-2s, somebody else to kind of stir the pot, make the patterns. And so actually, rather than a striker, the only reason I'd want a striker or an attacker right now is I actually think we're slightly light on numbers. I think to really get this thing going, Mikel Merino seems to be a guy we're looking at. I'd go for the left 8 guy who makes sure that we have a guy in that spot. If it's Rice on the day and it's working, great. If it's not Merino, if it's not Havertz and Jesus, those kinds of options on the left-hand side will bring all the players to life, I think. And you'll see the left-hand side being far more functional than it was on the right-hand side. And from that, we'll have consistent play. And from that, goals will come. So that's my fix for it.
I think that's all well said. Other positional battles are out there, though, Tim. Thomas Partey and Declan Rice dynamic was discussed by the manager on our top players playing together, and playing at their best is what we're looking for. I think today they complemented each other really well. The midfield with Martin Odegaard worked really well, especially in the first half, so it's really good, and we have more alternatives and threats. I've been critical of Partey. I don't think that's a secret. I think in this game, he looked more like a Thomas Partey that was once a very valuable and important player for us than he has in a while. And I include his run of games at the end of last season in that. And it's funny because I feel bad for Clive in a way, because Clive said a couple preseason games ago about Partey at a time when I think we're all rolling our eyes and just saying, gosh, this guy might be finished. Clive said, I actually think he's improved from the end of last season. But as is so often the case with Clive, it looks like he might be onto something, because I thought this was his best game for us since before his injuries last season, in terms of just the compactness, the willingness to stay high in the first phase of pressing, and then connect things and move the ball quickly when he got on it. It was a good performance, and it raises an issue as to whether he or Jorginho will start at 6 or Declan Rice will start at 6 with Kai Havertz at left 8. If you go back 2 seasons ago, Tim, I think the lineup just about picked itself when we started our season. Jesus, Saka, Martinelli, right? Xhaka, Odegaard, Partey, Zinchenko, Gabriel, Saliba, White, Ramsdale. Last season, to start the season, I think it was pretty close to picking itself. And it was Jesus, Saka, Martinelli, Kai, Odegaard, Rice. It was probably Timber at that time, Saliba, Gabriel, White, and I think Raya. Point is, there wasn't a lot of ambiguity there. There feels like a lot of choices Mikel has to make right now. Now, that's a good thing in a way, because it means, to Clive's point, as I reference him to try to make it feel like he's on the pod, don't think of starting 11 so much. We have a group of players, and if we're going to play every 3 days until January, we can't have 111. But he still has to pick one. And so the Jorginho versus Partey decision is a tough one. Or if Kai is 8, is Rice the 6? And is Jesus and Kai going to be the starting, the way we go the first game, or is it just going to be Kai up front? Is Martinelli or Trossard? Is it going to be one of the other fullbacks or Zinchenko? A lot of choice, a lot of decisions to make. How do you think about this? Is this a strength? Is this a weakness? Is it a strength, but only if Mikel gets the alchemy right? What would you like to see for the Wolves game? And do you regard there as being, or even needing to be, a first choice, quote unquote, 11 for us?
Yeah, I think it's a really good thing. I think this is something we've been working towards for a little while, and we're really getting there now. I think it's a really good thing in terms of creating unpredictability, and all of those options you mentioned, we'll see them all in the same game. If you start with Zinchenko, to your point, he's never really been a 90-minute player, so perhaps you play Zinchenko for 60, and then you look at what you need at left back for the last 30. Are you 2-0 up and you just want to shut it down? Bring on Tomiyasu. Is it a draw? Do you need something? Maybe Calafiori goes in there because of what he brings going forward. Ditto Jorginho, Partey, they can do 60-30, 70-20. Kai Havertz, I imagine there will not be many games where Havertz plays the same position for 90 minutes. When he starts at striker, let's say Jesus is on the bench, Jesus will come on and he'll go back into midfield, and vice versa. So I think we'll see all of this within games as well, and perhaps Arsenal starting to get up to that team that can make 5 substitutions that all mean something, rather than maybe 3, 4, as it were. And this is just what Man City have been doing for years, right? Like, is it Grealish, or is it Foden, or is it Bernardo Silva on the right? Who cares? Like, no one talks about it when the lineups come out, type thing. And I think that's kind of what we're looking to go towards. So for Wolves, I'm open-minded about whether it's like Havertz up front, or, like I said, I think we're going to start Zinchenko in this game. So I think we know what the back four is going to be. And it does look like, as much as I think we'll see plenty of Rice as a 6 next season, that's not what's been happening so far. He's been playing higher up with either Partey or Jorginho behind him, so I think that will probably happen. So in that case, you probably will have Havertz up front with Jesus coming on and Havertz dropping back in later in the game. So yeah, I think I've probably moved to that place where I'm not that bothered about who starts. But I think at the moment, unless there are specific weaknesses that they see in Wolves, because I don't know very much about Wolves, to be honest, where their weaknesses are, I'd probably be saying, Zinchenko at left back. I don't think Trossard's done anything to, quote unquote, lose the shirt. To your point, I do think the thing I liked the most about the last 2 games was that carousel we saw between Havertz, Jesus and Trossard, and I think that's going to be really useful for us this season. So maybe we see a bit of that, but Declan Rice couldn't start that game, and we couldn't start Saka in that game, so we really had to make sure the left side worked. So yeah, I'd maybe kind of go with, I think I'd go with Trossard over Martinelli, and give Martinelli went to Copa America as well, and I'd give him maybe a few games. Also, we play Villa next after that, and Villa have that high line, and I know we weren't able to spring it last season, but still kind of fancy Martinelli against a high line. So maybe you look at what Villa are doing next week. Maybe you want a stronger defensive presence at left back because of how kind of good they are out wide. So again, long way of saying I don't really mind, to be honest. I just think maybe Calafiori's probably not ready to start this game, and the rest I think will largely take care of itself.
Yeah, Calafiori looked pretty good, but like it's 23 minutes of preseason action. If Zinchenko was looking like an absolute dumpster fire or something, like I could see feeling like you have to throw Calafiori in for this game. But a home game against Wolves, there's no Pedro Neto. which, by the way, like that's kind of a nice thing. I don't regard it as an easy game. I think Gary O'Neill's done a really nice job there, and they're more challenging than maybe people are acting, and I think they're being overlooked somewhat because of the other fixtures we have so soon after that. But I think we can certainly get by from a defensive standpoint without having to rush Calafiori in. Paul, it's not the exact same question to you, but similar. I do think that the best teams kind of know their best lineup. You know what I mean? Not that they put it out there every week and not that they can't vary it, not that they don't have different approaches. But I do think they have that game for your life lineup that they know they would put out if it was a Champions League final tomorrow. And I don't know that we're there yet, but I don't know that you need to be there now. I mean, one of the hallmarks of Manchester City during this dominant run of theirs, apart from flouting financial regulations, allegedly, is that they've started in flux and finished in flow. And we did that last season, by the way. Except last season, we were starting guys like Eddie Nketiah, more on him in a minute. And this season, I think we're going to be starting, with all due respect, better players from the start. The decision points seem pretty obvious to me. Is it Partey or Jorginho? Is it Leo or Martinelli? Is it Zinchenko? I think it will be. Is it Jesus or Kai? But the Jesus and Kai one is a linchpin in a way, because if it's Kai up front, then the midfield three changes. If it's Jesus up front, then it's Kai at 8. I don't think there's a world where Jesus starts and Kai doesn't, for what it's worth. And then the midfield is down to one decision. Is it Rice at 6? You're not going to leave Rice out, so it is Rice at 6. I think it's worth remembering that in the Bayer Leverkusen game, where Jesus and Kai started together, Rice did not start, but that's because he wasn't ready. He was just being reintegrated. And it was Jorginho that started that game. So it is an interesting kind of cascading dominoes effect situation based on who he picks at striker. Do you think he might pick Kai up front for Wolves because it just makes it easier for him to pick Rice, Odegaard, Jorginho, which is the midfield three that I think he probably still feels most comfortable with? Or do you think he's willing to get crazy, play Jesus up front with Kai at 8 to start the season, and push Rice back to 6 and leave out one of those 6s he's been more inclined to want to play with? I think that center forward decision is the domino for all the other ones.
Yeah. There's a lot in play here. You look at the fixture list, and I'm sure Mikel has, for the first 12 games. And I'm sure he had the same reaction we did, which was, holy crap. Villa in the second game, Spurs in the 4th, City in the 5th, all away games. So he may not feel he has much experimental luxury ahead of him. And I think the lineup we saw yesterday is going to be super close to the lineup he plays against Wolves. So the idea that we won't see a fixed 11, it might feel like we do for the first 12 games or so. If he finds something that works, I think he's going to stick with it at least for that run of games. And so it may not be till we get past the Chelsea game, the 12th game, Chelsea away, where he's like, all right, now let's feel our oats. Let's start playing around a little bit. Where are those crazy ideas I was coming up with in preseason? The one exception would be Martinelli, in that I would agree that Trossard has kind of nailed down the starting berth, just at least to begin with for the season. I think he was quite happy to play Martinelli, and Martinelli deserved a start in preseason to get him going, to get his head up, to get him feeling fully engaged and trusted. But I don't think Mikel had any worries about not playing Trossard in this prep game for Wolves, because he knows what he's going to get out of that. Do I think he'll start Jesus and Havertz and Trossard? I don't. I'm sure he'd love to. I'm sure he'd love to try it out. But Rice has to be on the pitch, to your point. So where's he going to play? I think he's going to play him at left 8, and he's going to play Partey in midfield. And he's going to do a version of what we saw yesterday, but with Trossard on the left, because that's basically a pretty proven formula. And with Rice at the left 8, he can trust Jorginho a little bit more in the pivot there. He's got more coverage. He's got Rice free to rotate and cover for Zinchenko when he starts mixing up. knowing that Rice is free on that side of the pitch. I think that gives him enough balance. So I think that's the way he goes, but he'd probably love to be switching different looks from game to game right from the get-go. I don't think he has much scope to do that until about the 13th, 14th game of the season.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing with Mikel is, will he have the bravery, and I realize questioning his bravery is silly, but will he have the bravery to try something a little untested to start the new season? Or will he say, all right, you know what? Let's not overthink this. This is a home game against Wolves to start the season. We were real good last season. I'm just going to go Trossard, Kai, Saka, Rice, Odegaard, Jorginho, Zinchenko, Gabriel, Saliba, White, and Raya, and say, whatever I think I might evolve to over time, that lineup got me nearly a title and 89 points last season, essentially, right? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. I'll have a lot of talent on the bench. I am inclined, Tim, to think that that's what he'll do. And so it does leave us in a weird situation with the season starting, the window open, and unlike the last 2 summers, feeling some hangnail sensations of business that needs to be done and hasn't been done with the window still open. Some outgoings, maybe Nelson and Eddie specifically, and some incomings that we'd like to do. The Marino deal, it's gone very quiet. And no attacker is even linked, really, that I've seen. And those would be 2 areas I think people think if we really want to go all out, like really want to win the Champions League and the Premier League and all of it, you'd probably do 2 signings in those positions, right? One each in those positions.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I was gonna answer there, but I mean, essentially, obviously, we have to look after our own business and blah blah blah, and that's kind of what we're doing. But if you look across the league, this is pretty typical. I don't think there's a team in the league who considers their business finished just yet.
Chelsea, by the way, if you're not following it, they are having some very big difficulty getting some deals over the line. And apparently the Gallagher sale and the Omarodian buy, they're all collapsing. And yeah, there's some interesting shit going on.
To buy Joao Felix to...
Yeah, Newcastle can't get Gahey now, apparently. Like, it is not an easy window for one reason or another.
No. And, look, we're going to do a pod on Man City tomorrow, but they've bought 1 player in and they still need 2 more. And usually if you look at City not having done all their business, that's usually a good indication of what the market's like at the moment. I've said many times over this summer, I'm confident enough to start the season this way. We are still a really, really good team who I would expect to be favourites for every game before the end of the transfer window. I do want those players by August the 30th, the kind of the midfielder and the attacker for numbers as much as anything. But yeah, like not everything's been done. We've still got the goalkeeper situation. Again, I'm more relaxed about that just because that's like the second and third choice goalkeeper. Like we know we're starting the season with David Raya, right? It might get a bit messy if he gets injured or something and we suddenly actually need Aaron Ramsdale or a third goalkeeper or whatever. But that's, that's a smaller risk. But yeah, like there's still stuff to do, undoubtedly, and I think it's been a double whammy this summer for everyone, ourselves included, in terms of, first of all, the tournaments that always delays business, but also the PSR rules. Like a lot of clubs had to wait till July the 1st. That's what we had to do as well. Had to wait for that clock to tick over to July the 1st before they could do anything. And I think there are a lot of deals that are kind of stuck at the moment, a bit like Guehi. I think without some of those factors, you might have seen someone like Eze move by now as well. And it doesn't feel like this summer we've had that big unblocking transfer that really really gets things moving. Unfortunately, I do have a suspicion that if City get the money touted for Julian Alvarez, they might use that to go and buy Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle because that's an area of need for them. And then that might get Newcastle over the line for Mark Guehi. And then, I think that could possibly be the kind of chain reaction. However, like until that happens, I think a lot of clubs are in the same boat. And one of the things I know City are relying on, because they haven't done the business they need to do yet, but they've had Pep for 8 years. All of them know his system inside out. So even if they're a bit rusty physically, because all of their players that went to the Euro knockouts, they come back today to training. So they've all had more time off than our guys have. But even if they're a bit rusty physically, I think the thinking at City is these guys know how to play our football, and they will, like, tactically, they will switch straight back in. And I do think that we're, to a differing extent, we're going to have to do the same thing for the first couple of games. We're going to have to be that team that goes, look, we got the same core as last season. We haven't lost anyone we didn't want to lose. We go into the Wolves game, the Villa game with last season's team, and everyone knows what they're doing, really. So I'm kind of okay with that. It's more August the 30th. I might get a little bit twitchier by then.
Yeah. Yep. I think, Paul, like, some of the stuff that's happening right now is maybe a little annoying. Like, I'm not going to go all art of the deal here and say when someone offers you something for one of your players, take their first offer and don't negotiate. But it appears we were unwilling to do a deal for Eddie Nketiah at the price that Marseille seemed willing to pay. They now look to be paying 30 million euros for Wahi, and that will almost certainly mean Eddie is not going to Marseille. Now, that doesn't mean Eddie isn't going anywhere. And it doesn't necessarily even mean that Eddie isn't going somewhere for what we want or more than what Marseille were willing to offer. But in this moment, there are a lot of people that are like, we should have just taken what was on offer. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I don't think Mikel trusts Eddie anymore, and I don't think he sees him as an important part of the squad. On the other hand, he's still in the squad, and he may not move. So do you have any strong opinions on how that move has worked? I think this is the interesting thing. I think we need another attacker, and I'd like us to get one. I don't know what that name is, and I don't know whose case we're on. We might be on someone's case. There is a perception that we must sell Eddie and maybe even Nelson to do that business. A lot of finance social media accounts are saying that is definitely not the case. We could add an attacker. I think squad size-wise, we're one of the smaller squads, 24, I think, in our squad versus something like 40 in Chelsea's. It's insane. But I could also understand if you don't move Nelson, you don't move Eddie, how do you bring another player in? How do you make anybody feel like they're part of the group? I mean, you could say, who cares? Do you have a thought on what's going on with Eddie and maybe Nelson, and whether that's linked to us being able to strengthen an area where people feel we need to?
Yeah. Well, of course, we don't know the truth, the details, all that kind of stuff, but that's kind of dull if you're going to talk about transfers. So I'm going to go with kind of what's being reported. And yeah, I think I tweeted about a week ago, you better know what you're doing, Arsenal, when we had 27 million on the table from Olympic Marseille. And we said, we want a few more. I was like, Jesus, guys, you better know what you're doing. Because it doesn't seem, strangely, it doesn't seem like there's a huge market for him. I thought there'd be a couple of PL teams in looking for Eddie. And maybe there's all sorts of stuff that is going on in the background we don't know about. But I'm going off the rumors. Yeah, I would be one of those who's like, WTF, guys. Take the deal that's there. Get this done. Get this moving. 25, 27 million. I'd be all over it. There were those who thought Eddie wouldn't go for above 10 million, 12 million because of his wages. I've never thought that was the case. I always thought he was easily in the 20s, at least 25 to 30 million, probably to a PL team, young English player, blah, blah, blah. All the reasons why that could and should happen. So yeah, count me pissed off, but it's a strong opinion held loosely because, let's be honest, we have no clue what's going on apart from there was interest, how real it was. You know, I heard Gunnar blog on his post-game video yesterday saying he didn't think the Merino interest had gone quite as far in terms of making offers as we thought. There's all sorts of things we don't know while we're getting wound up about stuff. I'm very sold on the Merino thing, but maybe that's not going to happen as things got a little quiet. What don't we know about the Eddie situation? Quite a lot. But yes, colour me pissed off if it doesn't happen, because it felt like this was going to happen.
Yeah. It's tough because, like, selling Eddie in a vacuum doesn't mean we're now a better chance to win the title. People are acting like if we don't sell Eddie, we can't win the title. Like, I don't see how those two things are connected. People are making them connected because I think it's like, if we don't sell Eddie, we won't buy another attacker. And if that is the case, then yeah, if you put those two things together, not selling Eddie means we don't buy another attacker, which means we're not as strong as we should be. Fair enough. If you believe that's the case, I do not believe that Arsenal Football Club are willing to gamble a move they want to do on the Eddie sale. You know what I mean? Like if it was really the case that we've got an attacker, we know he's the guy we want, he's all lined up, we just need to move Eddie on, and then we blow it over a few million euro. Like, when something looks not sensible from a club that has largely operated in a sensible way, I think it's fair to say that's probably not the case. Like, I still think Eddie will move. I am guessing that there's a lot of interconnectedness here in a lot of places, and maybe it's a Bournemouth who have just sold Solanke. Maybe it's another club on the continent. I don't know. Maybe it's still Marseille. Maybe the Wahi deal doesn't come off. Like, so many things look unclear. What I find more interesting, honestly, than the Eddie moving out thing is the incomings. And one incoming that looked like it was done is Marino, and it's just gone quiet. And Tim, you could go one of two ways here, which is just, business is really hard right now, and for whatever reason, we're not getting deals done. Nobody's getting deals done. It's all really difficult. You could say there's a bigger fish out there, and we're holding fire to see if that comes through. What's your take on the Marino deal and on incomings?
That rings true to me, I have to say, because this does look a bit like a slam dunk deal at a reasonable price, and it does sound like Arsenal have kind of got it ready to go if they want it, but there has to be a reason that they haven't pulled the trigger yet. And I do wonder if they've got something else in the crosshairs. Complete speculation. I've got no idea. I could just be, they could just be incompetent and I'm looking for excuses. But that does ring, because I just can't think of a reason why this deal wouldn't have been accelerated. And like Paul said, James has been saying, this isn't as far along as people have said. And you have to say that the way things have turned out, James was absolutely right, because 2-3 weeks ago this kind of looked like a done deal, and it's not been done yet. So what James said must have been, was true in terms of it not being as far along, but it does kind of sound like we've had those conversations and it's kind of lined up. So I guess I just can't think of another reason why we wouldn't have pulled the trigger on that, unless it's we've got something bigger in the crosshairs. And like I said earlier in the pod, if I had to choose between, I'd like a midfielder and an attacker. If I had to choose, I'd choose an attacker all day long. I really would. And maybe that's the way Arsenal are looking at it. Maybe that's kind of the way. In terms of like Eddie, again, I don't really know there. On the face of it, to me, to potentially lose this sale over, I don't know, a couple of million, the payment structure, if he eventually doesn't get sold, or he gets sold so late now that it impedes us from doing what we need, then yeah, that hasn't turned out how we want it to. But we don't have enough of the picture there yet to come to that determination. So I'm willing to be patient. I do also think, in terms of the way we've started to look at sales, I think it's so interesting. Like, and we know that they're really important, particularly in like a PSR era. But when I see the conversation around sales, like, I really think like there's such a hyper focus now that it almost feels like that's the point of the club now. And like, it really made me think, and I don't just think this is an Arsenal thing, it really made me think about Alvarez. And like, it's like 85 million or whatever. And that is a really good price, and he's a really good player. And everyone's like, wow, look at the money City have got for this player. And yeah, that does look like I think he's a really good player, so I'm not surprised he's going for big money, and he's at a good age, but that's still slightly bigger than I would have thought. But we all focused so much on that I saw almost nobody saying Man City are losing a really good player. He provides cover for Haaland and De Bruyne. Like, he's a bit of a unicorn in terms of being a high-level squad player. And I saw precisely no one say, oh my God, City are losing a really important player. Everyone was just focused on, look at how much money they've got for him. It almost feels like we've gone into like a form of gambling in a way where we're so hyper-focused on sales that we've kind of forgotten about the football a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, isn't that just the transfer window every year? I don't know. I mean, like, guys, we have an excellent squad that produced 89 points last season. We've broken our scoring record in consecutive seasons. So this team has now had its second most points ever in the league, its most wins ever in the league, its most goals scored ever in the league. And there will still be an argument in some corners that we're not good enough in this area or that area or this area. It is just the case, and Liverpool know this all too well, that when you are up against City, at times they can make you think things about your team that aren't true and make you try to improve to hit some bar that 99 times out of 100 isn't achievable. City have had a 100-point season. If they do that this season, we won't win the title. And it won't be because we didn't sell Eddie Nketiah to Marseille. And it won't be because we didn't sign Nico Williams. It'll be because realistically, we're not going to get to 100 points. Don't clip that up just in case we do. So it's not don't try harder to be better, don't improve, don't strengthen, don't push the boat out, don't be ambitious. Of course we need to do those things. And I think principally in midfield and also in attack, there are opportunities to strengthen. You have to find the right player, because I'll tell you this. Bring up the squads around the Premier League. Jesus, Kai, Martinelli, Leo, Saka. 5 attackers. All excellent. If the guy we buy isn't better than them, he's just Eddie or he's Nelson. He's a 6th attacker who plays very rarely. Buying someone that's going to play more than Kai or Jesus up front, more than Saka on the right wing, more than Martinelli or Trossard on the left wing, that's not easy. You think it's Nico Williams? I'm going to tell you something. If we bought Nico Williams, there's a chance that 3 months into the season, we'd be saying Martinelli and Trossard are ahead of him in the pecking order. Not because he's not great, but he is not the finished product. Is it Osimhen up front? It might be. Maybe that's a big splash we go do, an in-the-box killer. And a couple games into him being a low-touch sort of Aubameyang-y kind of player where he's not on the ball, we're saying, you know what, we just looked more like Arsenal with Kai up front or more up with Jesus up front. So none of this is excuses. Like, this is the job. You got to find the player. You have to. I get it. But you also have to acknowledge what we have and recognize that buying anything isn't necessarily the way to go. And I do think we will do more business. I am not sure we will necessarily do the business that some people think we need to do. And this is the other thing City do, the way they spend and their capability. You know, they could go out, by the way, and wind up buying Eze and wind up buying Bruno Guimaraes, and we're going, there goes another league. They can make you feel you're supposed to keep up with something you can't keep up with. It's a long ramble, but it's sort of my thoughts on the matter. Paul, you want to finish us off here?
Yeah. Can I speak up for the other side, which is I totally get why people are going nuts over transfers. We're so close, right?
Yeah.
One player can make all the difference. Now, getting wound up about this player or the other player or that player or this transfer, but I get the fever. This is a step function. Like, I'll pick the one I'm hung up on. I think if we get Merino for left 8, I think it gives us phenomenal options that mean that game or 2 or 3 during the season where we fall off a bit because everybody got tired, and like the optionality you have with Merino there at left 8. You can rest Rice. You now have 3 guys you can play at the 6. You have 3 guys you can play at left 8. That to me is the move that gives you all the options across the season, that keeps the level and the intensity and the pressing game after game after game. So that's my pick, right? Somebody else can be worried about the level. I totally get it. And I'm there for it. If we're going to be crazy about football during the season, why not be crazy about this last 3 weeks and whether we make a move and whether we make the right move? So like, it's not just transfer season frenzy. we're so close. If we get the next move right, we might win the league. And if we don't do it, to your point, it's not a reflection on the fact that the team is very good. We got to but it wasn't enough last season. We fell short, right? Now we've added Calafiori, but we fell short. And we're going to be across 2-3 competitions and injuries. And, what have we done? We've done it in the defensive end. We haven't strengthened midfield. We haven't strengthened the attack. I think going nuts about transfers is entirely as appropriate as any of the other insanity going on. And I'm here for it. But it's all about the right move.
Yeah. And what is that? And let's be clear, it's not my job or your job, Paul, or Tim's job, or anyone's listening job to know who the players should be. That's why Edu gets paid the big bucks, and all the people at Arsenal get paid the big bucks to go figure that out and solve for it. But I do think then one of the things we have to do is acknowledge that it's tricky and let the freak out happen when it's all said and done, as opposed to today. I remember getting pulled pillar to post last season on the Declan Rice thing, and every time an update was that City were close, there was Edu out and Mikel out. This is the way the window goes. The vicissitudes of emotion with each update from some ITK of dubious pedigree. I don't know. I would say this: signings are an important way to strengthen, and an important thing to do if you really have the ambition to win the things we want to win. But they are not the only way to win things. And if you look at what Chelsea are up to, weirdly, I don't see anyone calling Chelsea title favorites. But Chelsea have done all the business. Look at all their signings. So why aren't we calling them title favorites? Because we know deep down that just doing signings isn't the deal. We have the team that just scored the most goals in the history of our club, that just won the most games in the league in the history of our club. We have added to it, and we have returns to fitness for players that we missed last season. And we're not going to have Eddie Nketiah start 10 of the first 11 Premier League games at striker, with no offense to him. I think we know that we're going to hit the ground with a little more compelling options. So there's every reason to think that we can still be very good. I do think we need to do business, and I hope we will do it. But I am maybe just a little more, I think I am just a little more at ease in this moment. Ask me in 6 days, and I may be apoplectic. We'll see. Let's leave it there. I think that's plenty. There'll be a Know Your Enemy pod tomorrow on Patreon. Good discussion today, boys. Appreciate it. Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, pause. Tim's on Twitter. Stillmanator. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
So excited to kick off this season together, everybody. It's going to be fun. We'll do our prediction pod on Thursday so you can see how wrong we are about everything. We love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Wolves 0.